Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Need Help. We are very excited to join you tonight to talk all about our mistakes. And like a hat wasn't enough for me today, so I had to go with a wig because that was just how my hair is feeling. Like it couldn't even, like a hat wasn't enough. So I'm like, yeah. Or maybe
I like that wig.
Last
Me
time.
too. I do too. Yeah.
So let's start with updates with everyone working on this week. Any news that people want to share? Scarlett, I know you have news, maybe?
Yeah, I have a book coming out. Well, it's in some countries now. It's already out in, I think, Australia and India and wherever else. It's already the 25th. So yeah, people are reading it, and we still have a few hours to go in America, but yeah. And it's exciting.
Yay! Awesome. That's very exciting. And Jenny, I guess your book's coming out early tomorrow too. So
I hope not. I really hope not. I'm woefully underprepared if it does. But we have been working on putting together a cool pre-order campaign. So
nice.
if you're planning on pre-ordering Dark and Shallow Lies, which you definitely should, there will be a cool pre-order swag thing happening this summer. So that'll be fun.
Ooh, I need to update my group because when I posted your book in there, people were really excited about it. So
well, if they keep their receipt, it doesn't matter when they order, they just upload it and they'll get the goodies.
Ooh, I'm gonna let them know.
Very cool. And I'm sure it involves tarot cards of some kind.
I don't know what all it involves exactly. That's sort of working on those details, but something cool.
Yeah, cool. I love it. Alicia, what about you?
No news. I wrote my first picture book, so that's exciting.
Oh, that's cool.
Fun.
It has a vampire in it.
They should all have vampires in it. Yeah. Is it a ballerina? Because they tend to be, but
isn't there a bunny? But what is it called? The bunny vampire? Yeah!
That's not a picture book, but he's cool.
Those are chapter books, but I loved those.
I read all of those.
Yeah, they're chapter books. There's a series.
I don't know, but you would know. You were a children's librarian.
Well, and I read them when I was a kid, like those.
It just reminded me of the Monty Python bunny that attacks people.
Oh,
that's what I think when I see it. And he's like, no.
Kind of.
But there's also a really popular vampire ballerina picture book. I don't remember, she's like, I don't remember. It's like Vampirina or something like that. But and I think there's like a couple of them probably. But yeah, I remember at least one of those was really popular. So
I love
it. You can do anything in picture books.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
You can send it to us.
I will.
Yes,
I need to do some revision. But it was fun. It was a fun little creative exercise.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, we had our episode, a couple ones back about how do you decide what to write next. And it's so funny because just this past week, I actually had 6 different projects that I could possibly be working on. And I made a weighted chart. And I was like, how can I decide? Here's the pros and cons. And here's this whole list of them. And then let me assign some numbers. And wait.
Yeah, it is.
And of course, they all ended up being pretty much equal. But I think I know what I'm going to work on now, I think, but I just have so many projects that I could be working on, so it's kind of an interesting time. But I mean, hey, it's always fun to have a lot of different possibilities out there. So that's where I'm at right now. But cool. Well, let's dive in. So tonight we are talking about different mistakes that we have made and what we have learned from them. And hopefully we've learned some useful info that we can pass on. So for me, I kind of have a whole list and I broke them down by topic. So I have marketing mistakes, business of writing mistakes, and then the writing in general, more the craft mistakes. So I think I'm going to start with marketing, because that's where I started with my list. So be thinking of maybe marketing mistakes that you have. But for me, like just one of the mistakes I had was not focusing on a newsletter early on for a couple of reasons. And one of those reasons was the first thing, like not knowing anything about it, that I think of when I think of newsletter is, well, isn't that ancient? Like email, really? Like that's the main thing. But then when you really think about it, it totally makes sense, because think about like when I post something on Twitter, like I might have way more followers on Twitter than I have on my newsletter list currently, but how many of those people actually see it? And you can go in and you can look at your impressions and, how many people actually interact with it. And then like what percentage is that of your total followers? It's probably a really small percentage. But when you send someone an email, how many people actually open and like read that email? Well, my rates tend to be over 70% of the people that I send it to. So I have like a really high like open rate, and people are just much more likely to see what I put. Like they've signed up, like they are interested in getting this. It is coming directly to them. They're not only going to see it if they happen to scroll through it on that day at that particular time on some social media feed. So I think the newsletter is an amazing way. And I wish that I would have started focusing on it early on, because I could have been building up this list of readers. And, for me, like writing middle grade teachers, librarians, educators, people who are interested in these books. But I didn't start really actively doing it until recently, when I realized what a useful tool it can be. And another reason for that, I think, with marketing stuff is that if you don't see success early on, especially before your first book is ever out, and you're thinking, who's going to sign up for my newsletter? This is pointless. Why am I going to send a newsletter when I have 2 subscribers and they're like, or I have like 10 subscribers, but they're all just my friends. Like, what's the point? Like, I could just tell them, So I got discouraged early on. And that's one of the big reasons why I didn't focus on the newsletter, even though people had been telling me like, you should do this. It just seemed pointless. And so that's a big lesson that I learned, is that with marketing early on, it's going to feel like you're just screaming into the void sometimes for a really long time. But it's all about being consistent and like continuing to do that until you do build that audience. And since it does take this time, and you're never going to have a huge audience before you have a book out, right? You just have to keep doing it. And the sooner you start and the more consistent you are, the bigger audience you're going to have. So that was my big lesson on newsletters for me. But let's see if anyone else has a marketing lesson, a marketing mistake that they want to share and lesson learned.
Well, evidently mine is I don't have a newsletter. So I just learned that. So I'm writing that down. That's good.
To get on that.
Yeah, I was like, also like, maybe I should be taking notes.
If I get a newsletter, will you guys subscribe to it? Like,
well, I will definitely subscribe to it. I've made a lot of mistakes. I actually have a couple more marketing ones, but I want to hear what mistakes other people have made.
I would say that's weird. Okay, I was trying to get the link for people, but people are asking for it on my Instagram. I would say a mistake that I made as a self-published author was you can get into a situation where you start giving your book away for free. And it's kind of a controversial thing, because I say don't do it. Don't give your book away for free. And you'll see that other self-published authors say the same thing. Don't give away your book for free. And I'm 110% behind that, because I don't think you should give your book away for free until you have a group of people who value your work. Giving your book away for free doesn't really do anything. Those people may or may not read it. They just may gather a bunch of ARCs together and they stay on a TBR for a really long time. So you don't see any results from giving your book away for free. So it's a little bit different in the traditional sphere, because some authors do get ARCs and some don't. But typically, if you're given a book by a publisher, people do read those. But yeah, I wouldn't do it. And what I would do instead is be more strategic about, as you gain those diehard fans, gather those people into a group and let them be your hype team, and that becomes your street team. So I would just go about doing that a little bit differently, and it will take time. Like I said, I had 2 books out before I created a street team for A Game of Fate, which released in September of last year. And I had 9 members, but those 9 members were really dedicated to my work. So the next time I went and added to my street team, I had like 30 members, and the insanity over malice and their hype of malice led to some literal insanity. So I would just be a little bit more strategic about how you choose to utilize like the ARC system and your street team if you are self-published, because otherwise, I mean, you're just not going to see a return.
Yeah, I think, and with ARCs, with traditional publishing too, being strategic is really important. I think they are tending to send out fewer nowadays, but I've still tended to get maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 20 ARCs or something, like paper ARCs to give away. And I see a lot of people just being like, okay, who wants them? But yeah, they're really, you do really want to be strategic and make sure they get the most use possible out of those. And if you can send, because people still like the paper for some reason, even though the books are going to be on like NetGalley and other places. But if you can send it to like one ARC goes to a sharing group that's really active, and so it circulates with 20 people or something like that, as opposed to one ARC goes to one person, and just making sure that you're getting them to those active people. Yeah, I agree. That's really important. And the street teams, I tried to do I did do street teams for my last 2 books that came out, traditionally published middle grade. And I mean, there were a lot of great people on the team, but having realistic expectations with that, like you're going to get out of a street team what you put into it. And it depends who your readers are. If your readers are teachers who are absolutely overwhelmed because they're in the middle of a pandemic and they can barely survive, they're not going to be like the same as a street team, like a Scarlet street team, for example, where they're able to do all of this like amazing stuff. I mean, if they can read the book and tell kids about it and like post once about it, that was a lot of work that they put in, so like having those expectations of like who is your audience too, and so what does success mean for like this specific thing, I think is really important. And also with marketing, one thing I realized early on, it was just a mistake in terms of my expectation, was that I would often compare different marketing efforts that I did to other people and be like, well, we did the same thing. Like, why wasn't it successful? And then realizing, oh, it's because what comes first is that people sell a ton of copies. And then what comes second is that their marketing efforts are really successful. Like, it's usually not the other way around, which is really funny. And you mentioned like it took, you had a couple books out before some of these things like really took off. And I think that's a mindset thing. Like, it's good to have that in your mind so that you don't give up early when your marketing things don't pay off the way that you expected them to, and just realize it's probably just going to take a while. Once you sell more books, these kind of marketing outreach things are going to be more successful.
I mean, speaking of mistakes that you make, I mean, a big part of publishing is like not being patient enough with the process. And you just have to learn that it takes time to get to where you probably envision yourself or where you want to be, and that's okay. And what you think is someone's overnight success probably isn't. So just remember that it takes time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But Jenny or Alicia, do you have anything? I mean, I know like Alicia, you're like pre-first book out. So maybe the marketing, I don't know if you have any marketing mistakes yet.
No mistakes, but tons of questions. So yeah, no, I haven't jumped into trying to market myself. I tried to brand myself, which I don't know what the difference is between marketing and brand, but still haven't figured that one out.
Well, I think, Scarlet has a really strong brand, and like I'm developing a different one, but yeah, go ahead. Like,
my street team member actually helped me with this, Lexi. She works in marketing, and she said a brand is really the story that you tell. So, you need to decide sort of what's your story and how are you going to communicate that, and that's your brand. Yeah. And you use that brand to market everything. Like, that's the silo through which you present yourself and your books to the world.
Yeah.
And I think Lexi is actually watching, so she might be driving right now, but if she has anything to add to that, she can in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a reminder that we are live and taking your questions or comments. So get those in. But yeah, definitely like with branding, I know I'm always kind of changing it and paring it down, but
It seems so confusing for like Kidlit. Because
well,
like you're
and
not like branding yourself to the kids. You're branding yourself for the teachers.
well,
That's
so
what
true.
confuses me.
Yeah, you have to know who your audience is. But so for me, I've kind of pared it down right now to I write heartfelt stories with a touch of magic and a dash of spooky. And I think heartfelt for me is the term that I'm using because it is hard to describe the fact that my books are essentially what in middle grade is called realistic fiction, which is the term they tend to use as opposed to like literary or like character focus. So they're like realistic fiction with a touch of magic. And so to sum up realistic fiction, I use heartfelt, which I think is a word that kind of gets that across. Like they deal with generally like poor kids who are struggling with complicated family issues. And then there's also a little touch of something fantastical and a little bit of spookiness. And kind of, I think that summarizes like everything that I write.
Yeah.
And I was actually just describing that to my agent the other day because, and like, we haven't gotten into this, but I have a new agent. So they don't really know my brand, right? And so it's like, I'm having to like describe my brand also. Like you have to let people in the industry sometimes know, like, this is what my brand is. So it's really important. It is important that you come to understand that. But since like Alicia, you don't have a book out yet and you're working on things that are very different, that's going to be something that will probably come over time.
That makes sense.
I would think. But Jenny, what about you? Have you had any marketing mistakes yet? Or just
I hope not. I don't think I've had time yet. I'm sure if we come back around, I will. I mean, I do have a box of ARCs making its way to me like as we speak. So that was good information. And my biggest marketing mistake, I think, was that all of my plans for being a writer ended once I sold the book. Like that was sort of like I never had a plan after that. It never really. I don't know whether I never really thought there would be an after that or whether it was just kind of like, the cliff where everything stopped. So I just wasn't really prepared as far as marketing and the knowledge and having sort of waded into that because my plan was write the book, sell the book. And after that, I really didn't know what happened. It reminded me when my son was little, he had this cartoon, Phineas and Ferb, that he loved. And they had this episode where Phineas and Ferb had this plan, and it was a 3-step plan. And step 1 was steal underpants. And step 3 was make money. But they did not know what step 2 was. And that's kind of like the position that I have found myself in. Like, I really don't know like what comes between like sell the book and like be wildly successful. So that's sort of what I'm trying to figure out. And if I had it to do over, I would spend more time investigating that like in advance.
Yeah, that's so funny. You're just running around with this pair of underwear now. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, like I don't know what to do with it. I haven't really thought about that.
I really like that, Jenny. I'm going to take that to heart because I'm in that part where like I'm just waiting to find out what happens next. But I think
oh my gosh, all those years I had all those years to like prepare for this, and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know, I didn't study.
I didn't study for this test. Yeah. I don't know what this is.
I feel like you're going into like all the ones right now. You're just preempting my whole business mistakes, I think, because this is so good. So true. Okay, but let's because I have a couple more marketing ones. So okay, one of them is a really small thing, and I think I've mentioned this before, and I guess if you want to generalize, it's like to really be careful about which marketing strategies you invest money on. But I had a friend make this really beautiful animated book trailer for my first book because I got a nice advance and I was like, okay, I could spend some money on this. but it's just not worth it. Like, it's one of those things that I would definitely, like, you can make something yourself that's pretty cool, and that's going to equate to the payoff that you will get on something like that. And so as beautiful as it is, and as amazing as it is, and it's really fun to show to schools and kids get excited about it, it's not something that is worth the investment. So I would say, like, early on, if you can force yourself to tamp down your excitement a little bit, and even though it's a really cool thing and you have the money to invest in it right now, maybe, you know, remember that this business, especially if you're doing traditional publishing, you may not sell another book for a couple more years because of the way, if you already just sold 2, they're probably not going to buy another one until the second one's already been out for a while. So you might need that money for something more useful down the line. And just be very careful about your first book and what you spend on marketing, if anything, because there are so many free things that you can do that could have more of an impact than doing something like a book trailer. So that's one lesson. Any other, Scarlett, do you have any other marketing mistakes that you want to talk about?
God, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know. I think in some ways marketing is just a lot of trial and error, and you have to be willing to do that trial and error and track. So, I mean, it's kind of like ads. It's the same thing. Like, don't just let an ad go, right? You want to track and see if it's actually making an impact. And I think the marketing is the same way. Like, continue to do what works for you. The things that work for me in particular are the quotes, a lot of quotes, just very simplistic things. And I continue to do that. And I still get a lot of attention from that. And I think also something I've realized, for instance, since I'm viral on TikTok, just because you're viral in a location or on a social media platform, it doesn't mean you have to be there too. So like, I don't spend as much time invested in my TikTok as I do in my Instagram, because my readers know that where I'm active is Instagram. Which, you know, so I could have spent all this time trying to be active on a platform that I'm not really familiar with, but I don't have to be. But I think that's kind of all I have to say about marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just have one more idea or mistake, I guess, for this one. And that was that it would have been really useful for me, actually, even though I'm doing traditional like publishing, if I had listened to the self-publishing podcast like back in the day and just taken the ideas about marketing, like everything that I could glean from those podcasts, and then applied them to traditional publishing, because there's just a much more direct way of looking at things, and like self-published authors are more empowered to do things for themselves, and then you're not sitting there just waiting to see what the publisher is going to do. So I think even though it's not that you can use all the same tactics in the same way, but it just would have been really useful for me to hear those different ideas, and also that different way of thinking about being an author, where you are much more empowered to like make it happen, and you're not just waiting for stuff to happen. So I do wish I would have listened to this kind of early on. But I guess that's my last thing on marketing, on the marketing side. So my next thing is kind of going back to what Ginny was talking about on the business side. And so my first one, and kind of going back to like, maybe it would have been helpful, even though I traditionally published, to learn more about self-publishing, is that in the beginning, I wasn't really thinking as an author entrepreneur, like as a business person. I was more thinking like, I'm a tortured artist. I just have to wait, you know, like you said, like wait on the publisher. I just am at the whim of the industry. And so whatever happens, I'm just going to sit here like and be terrified of the idea that people are like going to be reading and reviewing this book, and it might fail spectacularly. And if it does, oh, what will I do? You know what I mean? Like, like I would much rather have started out with that more empowered view of myself as an author entrepreneur, in which case I would have immediately been trying to really understand how the publishing industry works. And I would have immediately been thinking of, am I really going to be able to make a living, like a full-time living for a long time, for like decades, like with the way that traditional publishing works? And if I'm not, should I be starting right now to find some way to diversify my income? And the answer was yes. I should have started like 5 years ago, right? So yeah, I just wish I would have kind of changed my perspective and really seen myself more as a business person from the beginning and started to investigate some of those avenues. But do other people have thoughts on kind of the business side of writing, like mistakes that you have made?
Well, the fact that writing is a business to begin with is something that I feel like I look so awful in this light. Like my face looks dirty.
You look amazing.
You just look tan. I think you look good.
Stunning. She's on the beach. She's sunning herself. Okay.
It just feels so weird to be tan. I'm white. You know, writing is a business. And I think that a lot of times, yeah, we do go into it thinking like, oh, we're just going to be creative for the rest of our lives. But then you get into it and you realize like, oh man, like taxes. And then like, oh God, like I have to set up a retirement account because if I do this full time, like, you know, I don't have a retirement account. So, and then, you know, that all changes depending on how much money you make. And then at a certain point, like you have to decide if you're going to be a sole proprietor or an LLC, and, you know, and then you can file an LLC as an S Corp. These are all things I've learned recently. And then are you going to hire employees? And those are probably going to be contract employees. And then you have to make sure they all know that once they hit $600, they also owe taxes, right? And so it's just a lot of things. And, you know, those are things that I didn't know. No one prepared me for that. And those are all things that I'm self-published, but we all kind of get paid the same way, right? Like if you are self-employed, if you are a traditional author or a self-published author. So these are all things that I did not know. Luckily, I was someone who knew that I would owe taxes once I hit $600. But I know people who didn't realize that they were going to have to pay taxes on that money and had no money set aside for their taxes. But highly recommend, you know, getting the advice of a financial advisor. This is what was helpful for me. And a good CPA, someone who understands self-employment. And there are a lot of people actually who, in particular in Oklahoma, work with authors and entertainers, and they really know how to, you know, handle these things. But it's really weird. And then you get into other things, like if you start to do foreign deals, like how are you going to pay taxes on that? Are they taking taxes out from their country, or are you going to get what is the form you get when you have to fill out? There's a form.
I just filled it out, but I can't remember.
Anyways, there's a form you have to fill out to prove your citizenship, so you can get paid, and you don't have to pay the other country's taxes, but so you can pay your U.S. taxes. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of stuff, and you have to know it. And I think a big mistake is not realizing that once you start this, you're a business, and you're a small business that could eventually be a pretty large business. So just making sure you have that knowledge and you take all the necessary steps to be successful, because it gets overwhelming. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing, you know, finding what works for you, because like I personally, I prefer to do all the financial, like, and the tax stuff myself and to like learn it myself. Like I started out working with a CPA, but I found like I'm just more comfortable to like research it. And I think that I'm the best advocate for like myself, you know, and my money. And so like I prefer to do all that research, and that's just my personality. And that way I feel like I understand all of it. So even if I do go to a CPA, it's like I understand everything now that's like on this.
I don't even want to know.
Or with the contracts, it's like I want to like there's a contract department, but like I want to understand like everything about the contract still.
No, I think in the contract thing is very important, because you will find that even no matter who you are. Yeah,
because
no
I
matter
catch
who you are.
You know, like there's a legal team that's been going over this for months, and I catch something that they missed. And that happens to me all the time, you know? So I mean, well, not like constantly, but it has happened before. And so you have to be looking out for that stuff. But yeah, Jenny or Alicia, again, I mean, the business stuff is kind of happening now. So have you had any mistakes so far, or?
I have not, I don't, not that I'm aware of yet. And I think the only reason that that's probably true is that I happen to have a really good agent who is very on top of things and is very good at explaining stuff to me and very patient about the fact that I have no idea what he's talking about most of the time. But he is really good at like making sure, pointing out things that I might need to be aware of or that I might want to be aware of. So that's been really a huge help, like as a debut author, is having someone that I feel really sure is in my corner and like looking out, for me, because I am still trying to figure it all out. But definitely, like I said, I wish I had known more about that going into it, because there is a really steep learning curve. Just like, if I'd known that, I might have started earlier, trying to figure all of that out. I got my, the contract, the agreement to look over. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know. This is like 1 million pages long. And the stuff about like foreign sales, and all of that, it's all very, very complicated. And I'm like Scarlett and Alicia, I don't want to know about the taxes. I want to be told what I owe and when to mail it. And that is all that I want to know about that, because my brain has like only so much capacity for stuff that has to do with numbers, and it's a low threshold, really. So
even when my CPA tries to explain it to me, I don't understand.
Yeah. Up until now, my brother-in-law has done. I have a LLC with my sister that's a theater business, and my brother-in-law does our taxes, and he's always trying to explain it, and I'm like, stop. I don't want to know. You think that I want to know?
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I just want to know how much money I have to pay. That's all.
But I really trust my CPA because she's such a nerd when it comes to like all the tax stuff, and she reads tax laws for fun. And so I really trust her when it comes to like, she's going to do the process correctly. And, and she was the one who guided me down the whole like S Corp lane. And I would have never known that I was ever going to have to establish that, or, and then when we did do the LLC / you can file that as an S Corp, I went through an attorney. And so that was really interesting because I had to, pay for that. And it was like, I never thought I was going to have to do that, but it's all legal. And, so it's weird. It's a weird thing.
Alicia, what about you? Any business?
So far, I think I just like dodged a mistake. I got really excited when I went on submission, and I was like, well, obviously I need a website and I need author photos because like this is going to sell in a few days and I need everything set up. But then I got, my stepsister is a photographer, so I got a good deal on pictures, and I'm glad I did the pictures because they're beautiful. But I did not need them. And I started looking into places to like host the website, and I actually got a friend who's a graphic designer I like met with her to talk about her like doing my whole website and like how much that would cost and all this. And I finally like ran the numbers, and I was like, you know what? I can't afford this right now. I need to wait till like I get a check. And I'm so glad I did that because I have yet to get a check or even like an offer of a check.
I think that's so smart. I don't know if you ever stopped by Suzanne Collins' website, and I don't know what it looks like now.
So old.
For a decade, for like years. It was just like this picture of her with a rat and like the oldest website. Okay, so here's the thing, is like all you need, now you want to make it look nicer than that if possible, but for like $100 a year, like you can have a very nice landing page with some, basic pages with information. And I mean, now I would do it differently now, but it's not worth it for me to change it. But mine is actually a WordPress.com site. But I mean, it looks like a nice website. It has all the functionality I need. It's about $100 a year. Because, I mean, it's super like easy. And I think just ask yourself that question, like, what is the purpose of this website? How many people are going to be interacting with it? And so what do you actually need to invest in it? So yeah, I think that's a great lesson.
Why do you don't need your author photos?
I meant like I was expecting to need to like send it in for like an announcement.
You're fancy.
I love them. I was like, yeah,
I do too. I love them.
photos
I
for
do.
fun. Like they're
Yes.
aesthetic for me for my Instagram. So I was
There
like,
are photos that
Yeah.
I took with a friend of mine who's also a photographer that like I super want to post, but it's not for like a middle grade brand. It's definitely for my adult brand.
wait for my other book. Wait for your
Yeah, wait
new
for your
book.
other book.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I will say what I learned for myself with author photos is that, of course, I mean, if you want to have like the fabulous ones that get professionally taken, but for me, and this is just how I am, is that, and I will say I've changed since that time somewhat, but I did get like originally like professional ones then, but I am so socially awkward that I cannot have a natural face when someone's taking my picture.
Shut up.
No, it's serious. And so the only
love
way,
them, though.
well, the only way that I do my pictures now, which is completely free, and I could just be ridiculous and have whatever wigs and hats, they're all selfies. Like every single picture I use for every professional thing, when I have a Publisher's Weekly announcement, it's a selfie that I took, like, you know, in some hat or wig. And I think for me, that works way better because I like to change them out constantly. I like to control it. I like to have like, I'm by myself when I'm taking the picture, so I have like natural facial expressions. Like I just like that works better for me. So I did learn that. I will say like there's nothing like it's great to do professional ones if that fits your personality. But
yeah, I was just gonna say it sounds like yours totally fits your type of personality, and it shows off your personality. The fact that you're always changing the wig or the hat and you're changing photos constantly is like part of your brand.
Yeah, exactly. So find out what works for you. Like you may not even need the professional like photo shoot thing or whatever. But okay, so I guess let's kind of move on to writing mistakes that we have made and what have we learned. Now, one of mine, and I kind of hesitate to put this in the category of mistake because I think it's just something you have to learn, which is not trusting my voice and vision for the stories early on. And like part of me says, well, when you're entering this new profession and you're working for the very first time, like if you're doing traditional with agents and editors, it's going to be a process regardless of the situation. So I don't know if it's a mistake, but I can look back and be like, I wish I would have reached the point where I was very confident in my voice and my vision and my process much earlier on, because it would have saved me a lot of heartache, you know? So yeah, and I don't even know that there is any method that you can use to reach that any earlier. Like it's probably just a natural thing that you have to go through. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what my lesson is, except that I would really be striving to reach that point, like, and trying to find whatever way I could do to like get there earlier, because you feel so much better. Like you're not necessarily going to sell more, but you're going to feel so much more confident as a person and as an author. So that's one for me. But what would other people say writing mistakes?
Mine is patience. And I learned that this year on this whip. Yes, I learned.
I don't know why that cracks me up.
I've learned the hard way now that for me, I need to have like a really fleshed out idea of like an entire story before I can start writing, or else I write the opposite way. Like I go in a direction that's incorrect. So I'm trying to be, I realize that it's the daydreaming that really matters for me. Like it has to be fully formed in my head before I can even like try to get the cool stuff that's in my head onto the page.
Interesting. I love it. Jenny, what about you? She's muted.
Like,
hello.
We can't hear you yourself.
Oh, do you know why I muted it? I muted it because my dog came in, and my dog was not being polite.
Okay.
Not what you guys.
Muted herself.
The biggest thing I've learned is to make sure that your camera and your microphone are on
Exactly.
when you're
Yes.
speaking, and
Good
to lock your dog out of the room. Except it's bad because I can't lock her out because then she scratches on the door. So
Oh.
there's no way around it. But anyway, the actual thing that I have learned, I guess I've made mistakes before of sharing things with people before it was ready to be shared. And the reason is because I think there's a lot of talk about like critique partners and beta readers and all that kind of thing. And I have some critique partners that I love, and they're great at helping me out. But for me, I need to be done with my process before I let them read. And a lot of critique groups are set up in a way that is not very conducive to being helpful, I think. And because a lot of them early on, they're like, well, everyone write a chapter or whatever, it's every 2 weeks or whatever, and then bring your chapter and we'll critique your chapter. But that doesn't help me for a lot of reasons. First of all, because if I only wrote a chapter like a month, I would never finish anything. And also because if you do it that way, you're constantly getting like something that is really, really fresh. And that's not helpful for me to have at that point, when it's that new, I know what's wrong with it. Like I know where the weaknesses are. I know what needs to be fixed. And if I haven't fixed it yet, it's because I haven't figured out how to. But then once I get further along in the process where it's more polished, it's more revised, then there are things that they can point out that I might not have noticed, or I was too close to see, or that were holes that I didn't notice because I know, how this is all supposed to work. But to not share too early, I think is a big mistake.
Oh yeah, that's on my list actually too. Except mine is specifically like, don't show your work to gatekeepers too early before it's ready, because and like for me, and this also ties in, I think, to remembering that the people that you work with in the publishing industry are people that you're working with as a business. Like you're a business and they're a business. And so it's not like a personal relationship as much as someone might be like, hey, yeah, just send it to me any point in the process. Like I want to see it early on, and like we can just talk about ideas. And what I learned is that might be great for some people, but that's not great for me, because it often takes me like several versions before my vision is even clear. And so like if I've sent something that maybe it's clean on the sentence level, but I haven't achieved my vision for the overall impact of the book yet, they're going to give me notes that are not helpful to me because they're giving me notes on what they're interpreting, and that's not even what I intended, because I haven't gotten that across clearly enough yet. So I really learned that it's going to save everyone time and heartache for me to just wait until I have it where it's like my vision is as clear as it can be in this moment, and then send it on to the gatekeepers especially. But yeah, that's a great one. Scarlett or Alicia, writing mistakes?
For like craft wise, I do find, and this is where like my critique partners really did help, going chapter by chapter, or like a couple chapters at a time, is telling versus showing. Or now I do this thing where I show and then tell. Like I don't trust that like the reader is gonna pick up what I put down.
Yeah. I think it's always like, it's always a journey with the telling versus showing, because at first everyone's like, you have to show, don't tell. And then I'm like, actually, telling is really important, and sometimes you really do need to tell. And so that was a lesson that I had to learn. But
yeah, I feel like my biggest thing was like about my writing process. Like I kept trying to change it, and I finally like read this. I don't remember what book I read it in, but it was like, you'll never change it. Just embrace it for what it is. And once I just started to accept that my writing process is chaos, I can write better. But when you really try to like manipulate how you just think about writing your books, I think that you set up roadblocks for yourself. But it's very similar to also your writing voice, like Kim was saying. For a long time, I was like trying to figure out like what my voice is, and that is something people comment on about my writing, like trying to describe my writing. And what I realized is like, it's never going to change. The way that I write is the way I write. And trying to figure out or trying to change it is just like pointless. So I would just say embrace those things about yourself. And you can add to your process or modify parts of your process, but the overall bigger picture, like how you choose to write, is probably not going to change. I will still continue to write in a million different applications and lose my work. What it is.
That's hilarious. Yeah,
I know, but it's what I do.
Yeah, I've heard that too, about like the not fighting against your process thing. And I think it might naturally evolve over time. Like I feel like mine does, and it will be a little bit different for every project sometimes, but there are those core elements that probably have stayed the same from the beginning, and that probably would just not be worth it to fight against. Like you said, like there are those things that you kind of always tend to do. But yeah, with writing, like craft in particular, there are so many lessons, like just way too many for me to even, sum up, I think. But a really hilarious lesson that has taken me like a really long time to learn, and I still don't always bear in mind, is that you have to try to write books that people want to read. And that sounds really funny, but it's true. Like, especially, as this, when you're viewing yourself as this like tortured artist, and I'm very much like writing for myself, and I'm writing the book that when I'm writing middle grade that like I would have wanted to read as a kid. And I think that's great. And that is, I always start there, but like then there becomes this point in the process where I generally have to be like, okay, but how can I turn this into something that people actually want to read? And it's just so funny to me that I even, like, it seems so obvious, like you would never have to ask that question, but I do. Like that has been a process for me. And I think it's also that process of coming from that place where you feel like you're the tortured artist and I'm like bleeding on the page, and then coming a little bit more to reality and be like, okay, but are people going to want to read this? Like, how can I make it something that people want to read too? So yeah, that's one for me. But let's see, Jenny, do you have any other writing things you've learned?
No, I mean, I do have a lot, but most of them are kind of common sense things. Like, I don't know that I have anything. I've learned how to know, I'm getting much better, I would say, at knowing what to cut. That was a really difficult one for me because I tend to overwrite everything. And I've realized that a lot of what I write is stuff that I need to know. And it's not necessarily something that the reader needs to know. So there are whole scenes that I love that are like beautifully written, and they just make me want to cry because they have to go. So I'm getting much better at trying to figure out, okay, what's important to me as an author to understand, and what's important then like for the reader to actually know. So that process, the trimming and the tightening process, is something that I feel like I've learned a lot about just through doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alicia, what about you? I realize I have one more, but I realize it's kind of more back on the business than the writing. So let's see if we have any other writing ones.
Yeah, I think what Jenny said, like for the writing mistakes, I have all the common ones, like all the stuff that writer, that when you're learning to write, when you're learning to write well, when you're learning to write speculative with like fiction or like with magical elements and like dialogue and all that kind of stuff. But maybe one I did have for like 2 books in a row, I kept writing. I like really love this type of like prickly character who's just like doesn't care what people think, so she's kind of mean. And nobody ever liked that character. Like I had so many people read it and they're like, in 2 different books, they were like, this is like your other character that we just had to get rid of. And I was like, all right.
Character just wants to be heard.
I was like, okay, I guess like I need to give her some sort of a prickly characters are allowed to be in books, but there's always something that endears you to them. Like you like that prickly character for a reason, and I never gave anybody a reason to like them. They were just prickly. That's why I liked them.
Yeah, that's funny. I think, one other writing lesson that I can pinpoint has been really important for me. And this also sounds really obvious, but it's more powerful if you let the action drive the emotion. And that was important for me because I really focus on the emotional plot. Like, in fact, in my first book, Skeleton Tree, I wrote it with the emotional plot, and I didn't add the action plot in until after it had sold like an auction. And then we went back and we layered in an action plot, essentially. So stories, that's always the most important thing in a story to me, is the emotional progress that the character goes through, that they come to see the world in a different way or themselves. And so sometimes I will do that and it will, I'll essentially like leave out the action. It's just trying to learn that, and that the emotion is going to feel more powerful if it is driven by the action of the story. Mm-hmm. And always keeping that now in the forefront of my mind is very useful. And so if you are that type of person that tends to, like, the thing that you care about when you read is the emotional development of the characters, and all the monsters they're fighting, all this stuff is just kind of, you skip past it, then you might be like me. And so you might need to be like, okay. But that said, I still, there's going to be a really strong tie between the action and the emotion. They're never going to be really far apart. I'm probably not going to have fighting monsters just for the sake of fighting monsters, right? In my stories, there's always something a little bit more to it than that. But the closer that you can tie those two things, the better. And actually the more powerful the emotion will be when it's tied directly to the action of the story. So yes. Well, Scarlett, any other writing things?
I don't know. Writing is such a weird thing because I don't know, it's so subjective. But I think that I get asked all the time. Today I've been asked this question a couple times. What advice do you give to new writers? And I'm always like, just write your book. Write the words. Don't show it to too many people. That's going to be a mistake. Just get the book out and then go from there. But I think if you, I think I spent a lot of time trying to seek validation from, all these outside sources. And I think it prevented me from loving my work a lot. And once I stopped doing that and just did what I felt was right, I got a lot better with that. So.
Yeah, I love that. Well, cool. I did have one more that I should have put in the business section, but actually this just came up in one of my author groups. Someone had asked a question related to this. And I wish that I had always treated my agent, like I talked about, as a fellow business person. And so that when I approached them with an idea, I pitch them the same way that I would pitch an editor. So essentially, when I send a new manuscript to my agent now, I've already written the pitch and I include the pitch. And often I'll even have blurbs from beta readers, you would get blurbs from authors when your book comes out. I'll do it when I'm sending it to my agent. I'm like, here's what these authors thought. Here's what New York Times bestseller so-and-so thought of this book when I'm sending it to my agent. Because the thing is that, your agent has the job of building their own reputation in the industry as well. And so bearing that in mind, they want to submit and get behind projects that they feel really confident in. So the more that you can sell the project to your agent, the better that it's going to be for you. And remembering that, like putting a distance between myself as an individual and the agent, and really like when I'm interacting with that person, it is business me. And so I am just selling them the book. Like I'm not sending them the early versions, etc. I'm sending them the finished version, and here's how I'm going to sell it. And plus, like, they can use those materials to then try to sell it to editors, so they are like empowered. So yeah, if you're doing traditional, and I think that is something that I would definitely pass on, like if you're not already doing that. But excellent. Well, does anybody, I know we're basically out of time, but does anybody have any final mistakes or things that you wish you had known early on that you wanted to share? We'll put Alicia in the hot seat.
Something I wish I knew before. Is that what the question was?
Yeah, something you wish you'd known, or a final tip that you want to pass on to people.
I was just thinking about this afternoon. Patience, which is my least favorite word ever. I knew that going into the traditional publishing industry specifically, that you'd be waiting a lot, because that's what authors talk about. When you query, you're waiting to hear back from agents. When you're on submission, you're waiting to hear back from editors. And from watching Ginny this past year, it also seems like even once you've sold the book, like you're waiting to hear from your editor. And then you're also waiting to hear from your publicity team. And like you're waiting for a lot of stuff for it seems like a long time. But I now know that I also have to like be patient with my stories, which I never had to really deal with before. Probably because I had a full-time job at the same time. So it felt like I was constantly thinking or working on something, even though it was just on the weekends. I'm a fast-paced kind of person. Once I know what I want, I just want to go full speed ahead, and I need to be more patient. So yeah, I guess that's what I'll share.
Yeah, that's
patience.
Yeah.
Like the most impatient way you can talk about patience.
Yeah.
Well, Scarlett, is your final tip also related to patience?
Maybe. I feel like my final tip is, sometimes we get so zoned in on like, this is the only way. And for a long time, I really thought that traditional publishing was the only way, but that was not the only way for me to be successful. And I found a lot of success self-publishing. So I just think you should keep an open mind to all options and decide on your goals and what is going to work best for you. And hopefully it's the right decision, but no one can tell you except for yourself. So all you can do is listen to all the information we share here and make the decision.
Absolutely. Ginny, what about you?
I guess if I had like one final tip, it would be to make sure you surround yourself with really good people. Like during the writing process and all of it. Because like because I come from the world of the theater, so like that's a very collaborative art. And going into this, I think I was looking at writing as being a very solitary thing, which is one of the reasons like I didn't want to do it for a long time, because I was like, that doesn't, I don't know, it's just like sitting in there by yourself. It doesn't really sound like much fun to me. Because I'm used to like feeding off other artists and working with other artists and like bouncing ideas back and forth. So I think it's really important to find people that you can do that with as a writer, whether it's like people that can help you with your creative process, people that know the industry, people that can help you out where you don't know about any of the business stuff, which is why you guys have been so awesome. But also to make sure that the people that you surround yourself with really have your best interest at heart, that they really want to see you succeed, and that they actually know what they're talking about, because a lot of people do a lot of talking about things they don't understand. So that would be my tip. Make sure you've got good people in your corner.
Yeah, so true. And it's funny because we're talking about mistakes. And actually, I've been thinking about this for the past day or two, that it's so important not to let a mistake set you back in your goals. Because I think so often, when we make a mistake, and we all make mistakes all the time, you want to crawl into your shell and never come out again. And it can really set you back in your goals. And the same is true when it's not necessarily a mistake, but you feel that you have failed, whether it's that you've poured time into a manuscript and it went nowhere, or, or your book came out and it didn't do as well as you want, or whatever it is. We have this tendency to retreat from that and be like, oh, that book that got the 1-star reviews, I didn't write that. What are you talking about? And then we just pull back from it, right? And I think that can have long-term consequences, and it's natural. But I think the sooner that you can move past the mistake and just accept that everybody is going to make mistakes all the time, and everybody's going to have these things that feel like failures, the better off you're going to be in the long term, because you're not letting it hold you back, and you're not letting it destroy your confidence over time. And it's not stopping you from moving forward and still trying just as hard to achieve your goals, even though you had this one little setback. So that's what I would leave people with tonight. But thanks to everyone who joined us, especially listening to all of our mistakes. But hopefully the things that we learned have been helpful. And if anybody has an idea for a future episode, then definitely let us know in the comments, and we will try to tackle that thing. But thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I'm going to wave goodbye with Jerry, the skeleton hand. Thanks, everyone.